But to me, that real CISO is really security, data privacy, compliance. I mean, all those things sort of roll under that umbrella. So that's something, if you're a CISO or want to be a CISO, should definitely start thinking about and focusing energy and effort on. Welcome to Life of a CISO. I'm Dr. Eric Cole, your host, and we'll be taking you on a journey each week on what it takes to be a CISO and what are solutions that you can implement today if you are currently a Chief Information Security Officer or if you want to be one in the future. This is Life of a CISO. Welcome to this week's episode of Life of a CISO. One of my favorite times of the week. I'm always so busy running around, but I just get to come in the studio and feel like I'm sitting with all my friends virtually. I hope we can get to a point soon where we can meet in person and have live events. But until then, we're going to bring you Life of a CISO every single week, where we talk about the most important topics on cybersecurity and what it means to be a Chief Information Security Officer. Now, one of the pieces that I still find there's a lot of confusion when I'm talking with executives and other folks is, what is really a Chief Information Security Officer? I had a CEO, we were having dinner, and he goes, Eric, why do I need a CISO? Why do I need that person in the organization? And I asked him a few questions. I said, do you feel like you understand at a strategic level cybersecurity and what it means to your organization? He's like, well, not really. Do you understand at a business strategic level what are some of the big risks that are out there and some things you might need to do to make proper decisions? And he goes, no. And I said, and if a compromise occurred, is it something where you would understand and recognize that that was a risk you accepted, or would it come as more a surprise? And he goes, a surprise. And I said, ultimately, if a breach does happen and occur, are you going to stand up and take ownership and be held accountable, or are you going to point fingers and blame others? And then I said, before you answer it, be honest. And he smiled. I said, okay, you answered it. Right? We all know the correct answer, and we all know the real answer. And then I looked at him and said, that's why you need a Chief Information Security Officer. A CISO is somebody who's an executive that understands cybersecurity and can translate it to executives in non-technical strategic terms so they can understand the risk, make proper decisions, and be held accountable for proper security and or the impact breaches might have to the organization. And to me, that's something that really scares and terrifies me of what I've seen happen over the last couple of months in cybersecurity, is this lack of accountability, where companies don't want to be held accountable and they want to blame someone else for not doing what they're supposed to. Now, just so we're clear, not everyone is at this level. And it's something in success books that's sort of hard to understand, but it's the concept of 100% accountability. Now, I'm not saying it's your fault, right? Fault and accountability are two different things, but it's saying that you are responsible for everything that happens within your organization. And I'll be honest with you, if I was on a board of directors and executives are saying some of the garbage and BS that's coming out of their mouth that basically is saying we're not accountable, we're not responsible, blame other people, I would be like, wait a second. We have somebody in charge of the company that doesn't have control over it? Because that's really what you're saying. If you're saying that it happened, we have no control, we're not accountable, it's not our fault, blame other people, sanction, which seems to be the current mantra of these executives, what they're really saying is we don't have control of the company. There are factors outside of our control that we cannot control. Well, guess what? I don't want that person flying the plane. Right? I want that person to be in total and complete control of what's happening. So we really need to do a better job of embracing this accountability piece. And to me, it's sort of surprising that this hasn't blown up yet, and I believe it will, because it's just riddled with contradictions and ridiculously stupid things. So, for example, we are told in the beginning that with SolarWinds, it was one of the most advanced attacks ever seen, estimated that the attacker had thousands of hours used to break in. And this was so advanced that it couldn't have been stopped or prevented. Okay, so just absorb that for a minute. Then, a couple weeks, months later, we come out that it was essentially blaming an intern that had a weak password. Now, I'm not sure if I should be impressed or scared that maybe they're being honest and it really was the case, right? That it was a password of an intern. But then how in the world could that have taken 1,000 hours? I could show you right now how to crack passwords, right? If it's a weak password, that's a 5-minute attack. That's a 10-minute attack to break in. So you're sort of scratching your head, and I'm going, yes, I do agree that we have to be careful here. Advanced adversary doesn't mean advanced attack vector. And that's where I think people get confused. Because if you're an advanced adversary, how are you going to break into an organization? You're going to go in and use the simplest, easiest, most effective way to break in. So if I'm an advanced adversary and I'm going to go and there's a weak password, I'm going to take it every day of the week. So I do understand we can say that it's an advanced adversary that used a simplistic way to break in that was preventable, right? And I still believe on everything I've seen with SolarWinds, from everything, the little bit that's been out there, that this was a preventable attack. This was an attack that could have been prevented, or giving a little credit, it should have been detected much quicker and much faster. Because remember, the goal of cybersecurity is not to stop all attacks. That's impossible. The goal of cybersecurity is timely detection and response. That's ultimately what comes down from a minor breach to a major breach. A minor breach has 1 record stolen. A major breach has 100 million records stolen. What's the difference? The time to detect and response. If I catch the attack within the first 5 days, it's 1 or 2 records, maybe 10, maybe 20. If I wait 2 or 3 years, it's 80 to 100 million. So really this difference of what turns minor into major is not whether the breach occurred or not, but how long it took you to detect this attack. So to me, we need to have that higher level of accountability with executives and CISOs within the organization. And then just to finish up the SolarWinds, the thing that still boggles my mind is they say all those things about how this is the most advanced, sophisticated attack on planet and thousands of hours and blah, blah, blah. And then not only do they contradict with then saying it was a weak password, but then they go in and say, well, we don't know what happened, and it could be 6 or 7 months before we know exactly what happened. Okay. You're lying to me. You're lying to us. You're lying to the public. Which one is it? Because if you don't know exactly what happened, then you don't know whether it was really an advanced adversary. Unless you're just saying, because we couldn't detect it, that it must have been an advanced adversary, which that's a little different than what's being said. And also, if we don't know exactly what happened, then how do we know it was 1,000 hours? And that's my thing. When they came out and said, one of the big tech vendors said, oh, we estimate that after analyzing this attack, it was over 1,000 hours. Great, show us the attack. Tell us the attack. Give us the attack. Right? Clearly, you're either making stuff up on the 1,000 hours or you know more than you're telling us. Right? And I think it's going to come down to they probably know but it's probably not going to really fare well for them. Just want to take a quick break. I hope you're enjoying the show. I have this free webinar that I would love for you to check out if you want to become a world-class CISO. And then here's ultimately, to me, what it comes down to. Let's focus on what we do know. Supply chain. There was computers of a vendor that was on site at hundreds of government and commercial entities, and that allowed them to compromise those organizations. Well, here's the problem I have. Security 101. Any external connections must be firewalled and filtered. I've been teaching, or I used to teach, I should say, a security class for entry-level foundational people, engineers, technical folks that wanted to get into security. And as long as I can remember, at least 10, probably 15 years, probably 20, when I taught the modules on firewalls, I said the golden rule of firewalls, inline preventive devices, the golden rule of firewalls is all connections must go through a firewall. And this is a problem we knew about for a long time, where encryption traffic bypasses external vendors, wireless, other components. But the solution is simple. You just firewall and isolate those connections so they don't have full direct access, and you control and limit, filter, and monitor the traffic. So regardless of what really happened, there were solutions that were in place to be able to catch and stop and remediate. So it's once again, I think we're sort of in this dangerous category where a lot of decisions that are being made at the DC level, right, at the White House, Congress, and others, at least from what I've seen, is all being based on input of the big tech companies that were the ones that were breached. So, yes, I wish they would go in and own it, but they're not. Of course, they're going to blame others. Of course, they're going to say that this was a quadrillion hours worth of effort and this was advanced and impossible and blah, 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 blah. Of course, you're going to say that. But that's not really the truth. Why aren't we going in and getting other independent experts to actually explain what really happened and give a non-biased input to the decision makers? And then all I heard was, of course, sanctions, sanctions, sanctions. Blame others, blame others, blame others. Now, we can debate whether that's good or bad, but here's the bottom line. It's not going to change anything, right? Until we have international police, which is at least 10 years out, if not longer, where we can actually prosecute across physical country boundaries, because the internet is one big happy family, right? There's no countries when it comes to the internet. We're not going to really be able to solve that, but people have to step up, companies. To me, whether you want to do sanctions or not, great, but the big focus should be on legislation that hold these companies liable. Why aren't they liable for implementing a certain level of security? When you build a building, the person that runs the pipes and the electricity, they have to get licensed. They're overseen. There's inspectors that come and verify and validate. And if they go in and do things they're not supposed to and go into operation, they can be fined and they could be shut down. Yeah, we don't seem to have that in security. Now, I'm not a huge fan of regulation. I wish we could fix this problem ourselves, but if we can't, there is a time and place for regulation, and I think we're getting pretty close to it. Where we have to stop letting companies not be accountable, blame others, say sanctions, and then essentially continue to not have proper, effective security measures in place. So to me, I do believe the growing role of the CISO is going to be more on oversight, regulation, and those particular areas. And what I go in and recommend to all the CISOs I train up is when you're working at an organization and building a strategy, you should be using GDPR, PCI, HIPAA, the regulations that are out there, and see where you're non-compliant, because compliance is going to be a train that's coming down that track very, very quickly. And when it gets here, if you haven't started, you're not going to be ready, and it's not going to be pretty. So while I don't know specifically, even if you don't process credit cards, if you're PCI compliant, you're going to be pretty good. I mean, that's a pretty good level of security. From a data protection and privacy standpoint, while not perfect, but if you're fully GDPR compliant, you're doing pretty good on privacy. You got the foundational basic items in place, and these regulations aren't going to be changing that much in the future. So that's something to think of, that I know some companies have chief compliance officers, and I think they have way too many chiefs in some cases. But to me, that real CISO is really security, data privacy, compliance. I mean, all those things sort of roll under that umbrella. So that's something, if you're a CISO or want to be a CISO, should definitely start thinking about and focusing energy and effort on. Now, when we talk about the role of a CISO, to me, let's focus a little bit on some of the frustrations that executives have. I talk with a lot of CEOs. I do CEO roundtables. I do one-on-one sessions with them where we go in and we're talking about and discussing various aspects of cybersecurity. And one of the things, or two of the things that they bring up a lot when they talk about chief information security officers that drives them crazy is, first, they don't think they speak English. They go, Eric, we want to have a meeting and we want to talk with our CISO. And the CISO comes in and they bring a 50 slide deck that has all this technical information with all these graphs from all the different products in place. And they start going through, essentially doing a presentation that would be very, very appropriate for security folks and engineers. Totally and completely inappropriate for the executives. The executives don't care about the technical detail. That's why they have you. That's why they have engineers, right? If they wanted to know the technology, they would have became a technologist and not have gone to business school and get their MBA. They don't care about that stuff. And that's probably the first thing that CISOs and people that want to be CISOs just don't understand. They don't want a technical briefing. They don't want a 50-page slide. They want you to do the translation for them. And they want you to speak their language. And their language is simple: money. So when I train CISOs or I brief executives, it's pretty simple. I'm going in with typically one slide. Now, if you want to have a little intro, a threat, some basic stuff, you want to do 3 or 4 slides, that's fine. But if you're going in to do an executive presentation to the C-suite or the board of directors, and you have more than 7 slides, suicide mission. It's not going to end for you. And if you're over 20, forget it. Just get game over. You might as well tap out before you even go into that room, because it's not going to end well for you. And the one slide that I always say, and I drill it forward, and my frequent listeners hopefully know this: 4 columns. What is the high-level risk? In business terms, not technical. What is the likelihood of occurring? What is the cost if it occurs? And what's the cost to fix it? Boom! That's what they want to know. That's all they want to know. And they want the details for you to be able to provide if needed, but not on the slide. So essentially, you want to come in with, what is the risk, likelihood of occurrence, cost if it occurs, and cost to fix it. That's what you're presenting to them. And that's what they want to hear. Second big issue that I get from executives about CISOs is you don't understand business. You will bankrupt the company and spend every last penny on doing security. You always want more, and you never are able to balance the risk or clearly communicate that to them. So here's what I do. I go in and I work with my technical team and I find out the technical risks. Then I do the magic and I create the high-level business risks, the likelihood of occurring, cost if it occurs, and cost to fix it. And then I say, okay, how many of these are so critical that they need to be fixed? Let's say 3. And then I'll usually triple it. So I'll come in with 9 items and recommend 3. So now I'll bring a sheet that has 9 risks, and I have a line that says I recommend we fix the top 3. Couple reasons for this. One, it's showing them there's other risks that are out there, that this is not one and done, that there's still a lot more work that needs to be done. Second, we're going in and showing them that we can prioritize, that we're thinking like an executive. So it works brilliantly. Now, here's the problem. The way I see most CISOs work and operate is they'll talk with their team or research on the internet or attend a conference, a trade show, or a vendor calls them up, and they find this really new cool product. Cool new product, behavioral analytics, advanced artificial intelligence, all the coolest buzzwords on the planet. And they're like, this is so cool. And everybody loves it, and it's a top-rated product. So they then go in and say, oh, we got to have this product. We got to have this product. So they ask the vendor, how much is the product? $300K. So they go and they run to their executives. We need $300K. We need $300K for security. It's critical. It's important. We need $300K. Now, if this is the first time doing it, you're going to typically get a yes, because executives today are concerned about security. They know they need to spend money on security, and they assume that you're doing the analysis correctly, and they do trust you until proven otherwise. So they're usually maybe a couple questions here or there, but they're usually going to say yes. Great. Here's the problem. First, even though you didn't mean it, you went to the CEO and asked for one pot of money. Even though you didn't say this, what the CEO heard was, if I give you $300, sorry, $300, yeah, if it was only that easy, $300,000, $300K, we're going to be secure. That's what they heard, and you'll see why in a minute. Next big problem. $300K is what the vendor told you it cost to buy the product. That's for a shipping company to drop that product on your loading dock. As soon as you or one of your team members picks it up and starts installing and configuring it, it's more than $300K. Typically, the total cost of ownership is almost double with mid-range products in the mid-hundreds. So it's probably going to cost you $500 or $600K total to configure, set up, monitor, and maintain that. So now you didn't ask for the right amount of money. That's first problem. Next problem. You're asking for more tech, but the real problem in organizations is you need more people. Let me explain to you why breaches go undetected. In every major breach that we've been involved with, and we get involved with a lot of them, and we come in after the fact and we're closely looking at their tech. In every single case, the tech detected the attack. When we knew where to look, what to look for, and when in specifically, it detected the attack. Nobody responded or did anything, and here's why. In most organizations, you're generating 10,000 alerts a day, and your team, whether in-house or outsourced, can only handle 200. So if there's 10,000 alerts every day and you're only handling 200, you can see how that story ends. The first day, there's 9,800 unaddressed. The next day, just using easy numbers, there's over 18,000, 27. And so after a week or two, you have hundreds of thousands of these, and basically you're in a losing game. The probability of catching and finding the right attacks there is almost impossible. So your solution is, let's make it worse. So now we're going to buy another piece of tech that we underestimated because we didn't account for things, so we're going to go over budget. We throw it on our network. So now what we've done, from 10,000 alerts with only 200 we can respond to, we have now are generating 14,000 with only 200. And probably it's now 150 because some of your team has to support that. So you've actually decreased the number that you can alert and increase the number that are being received. So you've made the problem worse, not better. And then finally, you're basing it on a cool solution that was never tied to a risk. So now you probably maybe get some valuable info, but it's not really helping the problem because you didn't identify what is the main problem or risk you're trying to reduce. Remember, in cybersecurity, before you spend an hour of your time or $1 of your budget on anything in the name of security, always ask yourself, what is the risk? Is it the highest priority risk? And is your solution the most cost-effective way of reducing that risk? So many things wrong with that approach of running to the exec and saying, I need 300K. Now, there's another problem. Remember, when you went to that CEO and only asked for 300K, even though you didn't say it, they believe because you didn't ask for anything else, that's all you need. So in their minds, they said, if I give you 300K, we're going to be 100% secure. And please try again. But here's the problem, and here's why I know I'm right. When you come back 5 or 6 months later and you're asking for another 400K, aren't they a little annoyed? Don't they seem a little frustrated? Aren't they like, why are you doing this? And you can't understand why. It's a changing threat vector. Of course I'm coming back. But in their minds, they're thinking, you promised me that if I gave you the 300K, we'd be secure. And in their minds, they're like, okay, you lied to me, but I'll forgive you. And I will give you the 400K, but you better promise this time we're going to be 100% secure. They don't say it. That's what they're thinking. And how do I know I'm right? Because when you come back the third time, you never get the money. All right? The well is dry at that point. So that's the challenge we're up against. But notice my solution. You're now coming in with pure play business dollars is what they want to hear. Risk, likelihood of occurrence, cost to fix it. You're speaking their language. You're also recommending 3 out of the 9 or 3 out of the 10. So you're showing them you can prioritize and focus correctly. And then finally, you're also going in and showing them that you can think like a business person and more is to come. Now, when I present to executives, I never say 100%, because I'm sure there's some times in my career where I didn't. But I almost have a 99% hit rate where I always get the budget. Why? Because it's a no-brainer. When I go into the executives, I'm never going in with a risk that has a 40% chance of occurring. If it occurs, it's going to cost them $2 million, and I want $1 million to fix it. That's a silly risk because it's only 40%, less than 50, not even, it's more likely not to happen than it is. And if it happens, it's going to be $1 million, and you want 2. So essentially, if it happens 2 or 3 times, it's cheaper not to fix it, right? Because you sort of overspent on that issue there. So you want to go in and make sure that you're careful in terms of what you're asking for. So what I'm always going in is I'm looking for the ones that are above 85, and it's a huge return on investment. So I'm going to go in and say this is a 90% chance of occurring. If it occurs, it's going to cost the company $12 million, and I want 300K to fix it. It's a no-brainer. I mean, anybody is going to take that. And if you have the trust that you did the validation using historical and comparative data, and they trust you, you're always going to get that money because it's a no. Of course, you're going to reduce that risk. So that's how I'm always careful. I'm making sure that what is above the line in terms of what I'm asking for is such a no-brainer that it's almost a guarantee. And anything that's questionable or below the line, I'm going to leave till next time. Because I would rather this. I would rather go in and ask for 3 items, and they say, well, Eric, that 4th one looks pretty bad. I'll be like, yeah, it was borderline, 70% chance of occurring. If it occurs, could cost $7 million, and I want 600K to fix it. That's sort of a borderline one. I'd probably put it below the line, but near the top so they could see it. But I wouldn't ask for that unless they explicitly say, we want you to do that. So be smart about what you're asking for and always show that it's tied to risk. Remember, risk drives the equation, not the solution. So many people go in and they have a solution in which there's no problem. So you want to make sure you switch that. Now, one final warning because I want you to be successful as a CISO. When I was teaching this methodology for a long time, but if we go back over 10 plus years ago, whatever you recommended, they would usually cut back because security over 10 plus years ago, it wasn't really understood. There wasn't as much threats. It wasn't as big a vector back then. So I would always go in and say, expect about 60 or 70% what you're asking for. So if you're going in with 4 items that you want to fund, they'll probably fund 2 or 3. So you'll just want to keep that in mind of where you draw the line. That's just where the mindset was. And then starting about 4 years ago, they were starting to get to the point where if you were a good CISO that they trusted and they knew that you did your homework, whatever you asked for, they would give you. If you asked for 3, they gave you 3. If you asked for 4, you'd get 4. Then about a year and a half ago, they maybe would add 1 or 2. So if you add 3, they give you 4. However, in the last few months, right now that we're sort of starting to get back to whatever we call the new normal, and companies are recognizing the importance of security and the SolarWinds breach and all these other breaches that are starting to get publicized now that the media covers something else, right? Things that are really important to us, in my opinion, the number one threat, right? Cybersecurity. So companies are starting to gain more awareness. But here's what I just saw a couple of weeks ago, and I want you to be super careful. I was training up a new CISO, so I was just sitting in the stands watching, and they presented to the board. Did the format, did everything, and they had a chart that had 3 items on it, and they were asking for $8 million. And then there was an additional 8 other items, so I think there were 11 total on the chart. And they get done presenting and saying, I would like my several $1 million. And the executive adds it all up and says, well, all 11 items is $55 million. So we're going to give you $55 million. We want you to do everything. We want you to fix everything. And for some reason, people get so mesmerized with money, right? They get so excited. The person was like, oh, wow, this is, and I jumped, I had to throw a lifeline. So I had to jump in and go, whoa, whoa, whoa. With all due respect, there's no possible way that can be done. I said, let's do this. Why don't you approve what we're asking for? And then we'll reevaluate, and we could probably add maybe 2 or 3 items. So maybe we could take another 8 or 10 million, but there's no way we could take the 50 plus. And then we'll come back to you at the next meeting with a new upgraded plan. But we do have to be smart and reasonable about how we're scaling this approach. And they all said, okay, that seems reasonable. Thank you, Eric. And we leave the meeting. And this was one of those weird meetings because I just saved this person. I mean, this person was going to drown and never be found again. So I saved their life pretty much. And so I'm thinking they're going to thank me and hug me. And we get out of the meeting and they're angry. They're like, Eric, how dare you? Like, you're welcome. They're like, Eric, how dare you? I had a $50+ million budget. That would have been amazing. I would have one of the biggest budgets out of all the CISOs I know, and you killed it. I said, forest through the trees. I said, let me ask you a question. Did you ever think about why they did that? Why the CISO would give you that money? And they said no. And I said, here's the real question. If I didn't jump in and you took the $50+ million, really honestly, would you have been able to deliver on it? Or would it have been a cluster, you know what? Because you don't have the people, the resources, the team. You would essentially had to triple your team, hire I said, it would have been a disaster, and you and I both know it. And they sort of thought going, yeah, you're right. I guess I should be thanking you. Yes. And then they said, why would they do that? Because here's what's happening today. With CISOs, where they're not really educating the executives in the accountability, executives want to make sure they have zero liability. So what's happening is if you're a CEO and you gave the security team $5 million and there was a major breach, the board could say you were negligent and fire you. That's happened. So what executives are saying, well, if you only ask for 5 or 6, but I give you 50 plus. Now I went beyond any reasonable measure, so the board can't hold me liable. So it's really an escape plan. I don't think it's going to work, but that's what they're doing. It's blood money. Don't take it. Right? But you got to be careful with that. Make sure you don't get caught up in the emotion of the situation and agree to something you can't agree to. So have your chart. Be smart. Be logical. 3 or 4 items. 10 or 11 items on the sheet. And if they want to give you more money, say, let me analyze, but only take what you know you can deliver on. And if you do that, you're going to join the ranks of being a world-class CISO. So once again, just want to thank you. If you would like to be a CISO, or you're currently a CISO and you would like some training, please go to secure-anchor.com CISO. We have some ebooks and you can sign up for a free consultation. And also, if you have executives or folks that want a very good, easy-to-read book on cybersecurity, go ahead and pre-order your copy of cybercrisisbook.com. It's predicting it's going to sell out, so you definitely want to buy your copy today. And thank you so much for listening to my show.